I had this idea for cruising, this book I had read and had tried to adapt, but couldn't get control of the rights of. So I sort of taken the idea of characters cruising. Then from my college days, I got this idea of picking up a girl in a art gallery. You walk and you see people looking at paintings and looking at each other, and a sort of a sexual pickup in an art gallery. So those ideas were sort of mulling around in my head. And the thing that sort of gelled it for me was a talk show where they had a transsexual on, being interviewed by Phil Donahue. So then that sort of got together with the idea of a psychiatrist, that every time he gets aroused, the woman comes out and has to kill the person that's arousing him.
You mean when Elliot got turned on, Bobby took over?
Those two ideas, they were melded together into what became Dress to Kill.
I was Brian's agent when he was just starting out. We did a film together, Obsession. We were working on a couple of other projects, trying to get something ready that we could make together. And in between, Brian had done Carrie, and he did Fury, home movie. I remember my secretary said, Brian's on the phone, and he said, I have the original screenplay, which I think you may like. He said, how soon can you read it? I said, Brian, how about if I call you in 2 hours? He said, you read it right now? I said, I'll shut off the phone and read it right now. So I read the script, and I called him on the phone, and I said, you want to come over? He said, well, what do you think? I said, well, if you and I can't agree that I produced a movie, I think I'll kill you. I was very excited about making the movie. So we then began to talk about how we might get it together. I knew that Sam Arkoff, who I had a very good relationship with, I'd done lots of business with over the years, was a big admirer of Brian's. So I called up Sam, and I made the deal with him and, told him how much money we wanted. And Sam did exactly what we wanted. He put up the $6 million. He left us completely alone to do what we liked. And Brian made the film he wanted to make, and that was it. Originally, he started with this figure of a man, nude, with a razor, shaving himself.
Once in college, when I was shaving, I started to shave my face, and then I started to shave my neck, and then I started to shave. I said, what happens if I shave off my chest hair? What happens if I shave off my pubic hair? I said, well, this is, he started a guy who's got a straight razor. And then he's taking all his hair off his body. It's all done in very big close-ups. And then he gets to his penis, which is the big problem with the transsexuals, like this penis, when am I going to get my penectomy? When am I going to get this thing taken off and have a woman's organ created for me? So he's, suddenly, he hacks off his penis.
I don't think you would have seen the penis severed, but I think you would have gotten the idea from the blood that he castrated himself.
And that was the beginning of the movie, and I don't know exactly why I got rid of this sequence.
He shot it two or three different ways and then abandoned it, and then decided to start with Angie Dickinson in the shower.
Instead of starting with the transsexuals problem, we had to start with our leading character's problem.
My initial reaction when I read it was, oh my God, I can't do this, because Policewoman was finished shooting in the spring of '78. And now this is only a year later. And I was a heroine. I was a very public, popular heroine. So I said, Brian, I can't do that. Oh, my God. And he said, hey, read it again. So I read it again, and he called, and I answered the phone, and he said, this is your director speaking. I hadn't said yes yet, so we talked about it. He said, would it help if I got a double? And I said, oh, yes. That was the end of it. It was, well, then let's go to work. Double was for anything that we needed it for, especially the shower sequence. It was hell. So in the shower, worrying about your hair and your makeup and all that stuff, it makes it very trying. So as much as we are aware of all the crew and the camera and the lights and the microphone, we also then have to forget it all. And that's what acting is about.
And then, of course, we got in the body double because why keep Angie in the shower for all that time? And we got a girl, and me directing the girl and the guy caressing her is talk about a laugh track, trying to get her to touch the things she's supposed to touch, keep one hand going and get the other hand going. And just listening to my track, directing her is a laugh riot, let me tell you.
I remember he said, I'm going to go look at your double now. Pick your double. I said, don't make her too good, Brian. And Ralph Boda came to me and he said, you know what we're doing in there? We're doing beaver shots. I thought I looked fantastic.
I guess he was having a hard time finding anyone who could really work that young in the role. So I got this call from Brian saying, listen, would you just come over and maybe we should read through a couple of scenes together. And I read a few scenes with him, and I went home, and then I guess it was like next day I got a call saying I think he'd like me to play the part, which is...
City Science Championships are next week.
That's so much like a scene between me and my mother, with me being up all night with one of these computers. And to this day, I'm up all night. I was up all night with the computer last night.
I was aware enough of Brian's history and Brian's past to know that there was a lot of Brian in the character. Brian never directed me to be like him. I mean, it wasn't something that he tended to say to me, which is probably a good thing, because I think talk about making an actor feel tense and constipated. Just go to an actor and say, oh, by the way, you're playing me.
I had the art director sort of make it look exactly like one of my computer exhibits.
And I had to, I'm so embarrassed. I had to ask Brian, what are binary numbers? And he explained it to me, and I still don't know. Other than that it's 2. That doesn't explain it either.
His initial concept of the scene was that Peter was very hyper and running around the room and kind of showing his mom. And I was like, Brian, I've been up all night doing school papers, and I don't have any energy. And he really got frustrated with me. I remember Brian really kind of was looking at me like, I'm the director, and this is what I want to. I said, I'll do it your way. But I said, I just might be more interesting just to sit there and show it to my mom. And he walked away, I remember, and he wasn't around for a few minutes. I thought, okay, I've really blown it. He's really mad at me. And he came back and said, all right, you're right, let's do it your way. He got annoyed, but he also kind of took my point and didn't push me to do it a way that I think would have felt silly. And so ultimately, I really liked the scene, although I think I spent most of my time being worried that Brian was mad at me.
Michael's the consummate professional. I mean, he enjoyed the concept of the script. He had made some very difficult action picture before where he's running around and jumping and out at night when it was cold. And, he always thought of this picture as, one of those pictures like a drawing room comedy. You have a chance to sit down and play all your scenes, your nice clothes. You don't have to do anything, too energetic.
Well, Michael Caine is just the most delicious person to ever have on a set unless you're trying to concentrate. And I was trying to concentrate because I had a big scene. Just is the funniest man alive. But then he just can shut it on and off as he does and did. He's one of those who makes it look so easy.
All the psychological stuff in the script with him to make sure it was all sound. I patterned him very much after the psychiatrist that I was going to.
We know and have heard of many women especially who fall in love with their psychiatrists, just as they do their directors, because they're molding them, they're helping them, they're comforting them, and it's easy to understand. So she would easily have said, do you find me attractive, and would you like to sleep with me?
The famous museum scene, we tried the Metropolitan, we couldn't get inside. We tried the Museum of Modern Art, we tried the Frick, we went to Brooklyn, we couldn't find a museum. Brian and I are both from Philadelphia, so Brian said, how about the Philadelphia Museum? I said, oh my God, we're gonna travel all the way to Philadelphia. He said, well, George, what else can we do? I said, if I tell Sam or the people at the studio that we're gonna go to Philadelphia, they're gonna have a fit. So he said, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to go, but we're not going to tell him. And I remember Sam called me up. He said, I hear the crew left for Philadelphia. I said, yeah. He said, well, you didn't tell me. I said, well, didn't anybody tell you?
It was one of those scenes that I had up in my room with all the storyboards.
I remember during Just to Kill going to his apartment, where his office apartment, and the storyboards that he'd draw himself all over the walls, and then just tacked up all next to each other, and everything planned out, and every camera movement planned out, and there was nothing left to chance with him visually.
By the time you shoot the movie, you have lived this sequence 100,000 times. You've seen every visual possibilities. You know, the way these sequences work is they have to have a visual idea. So with Angie, you know, we just worked through the whole emotional line of the scene, and I basically shot all her coverage and then had to deal with everything that she saw, basically. That's what makes the sequence great. It's the combination of her face and the point of view.
Pick Up Turkey was my idea. And, you know, you feel like a real jerk on a movie a lot because you're saying words somebody else wrote, you're doing things somebody tells you to do. So when you finally come up with something that you did all by yourself, I at least feel so good. And Brian said, write something down, you know, do your shopping list at Thanksgiving. And so I Pick Up Turkey. The original script had a narration over the museum describing everything. And a few months after the movie was finished, Brian called to say he's looking good or whatever. And I said, well, when do we do the narration? He said, we don't need it. And I was so thrilled because that was what his plan was, to not use narration. He needed it, and then it was there. And of course, it helped me to act the scene, knowing what the narration was.
The museum sequence was the first sequence in which I didn't have to worry about dialogue. It told a rather involved story with little twists and turns here and there. And the graphic quality was so beautiful. The Steadicam shots, the points of view.
That's the Steadicam that you could not have done that scene without. And the Steadicam allows the operator to move as much as he wants to when he walks, and it won't bobble. But the trouble is I was moving too. And to stay in focus, we had to keep it equidistant. So we geared the rope so that I would stay the same distance for focus. As serious as it is, it's also very humorous because she kind of laughs at herself for even caring who this ridiculous man is. And then she gets intrigued, and then she finds him rude. Now she's going to confront him for being so rude. Now she's going to confront him because for being so good looking. And it's just filled with that. That's what made the scene so riveting, to have him, the pickup, appear and then disappear, and you want to look around corners. Brilliant. It's just a brilliant designing.
Music's very important in my work for the simple reason I have long silent sequences. They're long, purely visual sequences, and the music supplies a kind of emotional line for them. It sort of directs the audience emotionally, because it's usually a character going through a space and experiencing something, and you read stuff in their expressions and also how the music colors their expressions. And Pino did a fantastic score for the museum sequence.
In New York at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to make it appear as though we were, of course, using that museum. The specificity of Brian De Palma was most evident to me outside the museum because he had an enormous shot. And I had to do it many, many times. And I remember, no. First you look at your watch, then you look at the cab, then you look at your glove, then you do... And I was not following it, and it stopped that huge crane shot many times in frustration over my not getting it right. But it had to be precise. Then you look off, back at the watch, onto the glove, onto the taxi, and it worked. And it could only have worked the way he did it. Otherwise, it's just a shot of a woman coming out of the museum.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so rude. Thank you for picking up.
I remember being in a cab with Angie when we were shooting the scene, you know, driving down Fifth Avenue.
I don't recommend it at home. The difficulty of that shot was, if you can picture a car, of course, now the back window slants. From a bus or a truck, you can see down into the back seat. And I'm lying in full view. I can see the truck driver and the bus driver. And they're looking down into a taxi with Angie Dickinson lying down. They don't see the driver, the camera operator, and Brian all pushed as far as they can get. All they see is Angie having one good time in the back of the taxi in the middle of New York. Oh, God. And we went around and around. It was real. No police cutoff or anything. Just, okay, go, and start. And just around and around and around and around. Having orgasms all afternoon.
It's an orgastic scream, which sort of replicates what happened in the first dream, and tying it into, you know, driving up to the apartment where her final screams are going to be heard. This is a place where Wall Street guys went with hookers. That's how I discovered it, basically. You know, I said, this is a kind of an interesting place down here in Wall Street. Who lives here? And I would see these really good-looking women in the hallways, and I, you know, took one aside and started to talk to her, and sure enough, this is a hooker that's meeting some Wall Street guy here for a rendezvous during the middle of the day.
It took 8 hours to light the sequence because they had to light 2 rooms. It was hell shooting it. I've never, ever done that lengthy sequence without stopping. And I kept getting hung up on my bra. And he said, well, use it. You know, if you're hung up on it, get angry and use it. Don't just stop the scene, which is what I did. It wasn't so hard hitting the marks and things like that. It was just the timing and getting dressed. I just had to put on a slip and a bra and the dress and the coat and the purse. Oh, I don't think we got the shot till 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was since 7 in the morning.
Ironically enough, the apartment we got to shoot it in was right above the apartment I was living in. So I knew the floor diagram because I was living right below him. I ran into an old girlfriend in the village. I went down to her loft, and as we were reminiscing about our college days or something, there was a guy that knocked on the door, and it was a kind of a very strange guy, and she went over and she talked to him for a second, and then she came back with this form. And apparently she had gotten BD, and you have to fill out a form to show them all of your partners you have slept with. And that's where I got that idea.
And I love the touch of the little girl because, as Brian said to me, he said, you know how when you're guilty and somebody looks at you, you know that they're seeing all of your guilt? That was put in there deliberately and wonderfully. Brian's a genius. The prosthetics were designed way before the movie. The palm, the throat. I was pretty patched up. I had died in a lot of movies, but never with the knife and the blood to see how they cut and then make the blood ooze out. It was fascinating. They would pack my neck with a bag and then put what they had made the mold, the rubber mold from me, over it so that then when the razor cut me, it cut the blood pack so it would come pouring out. It was quite frightening. You know, again, even though we're acting, you really do displace yourself. And you're almost there, but naturally you're not quite. In a fire sequence, you know they're going to put the fire out. In real life, you don't, of course. But you do get so concentrated and grounded that it can be quite frightening.
I'm gonna give my broker a little call. Well, what about... Shooting it was very, very, very technical. I really only saw Angie. I think there's only one shot where we're actually together. I don't know there's so many shots in that. So I had to keep that visual of her in my mind of how horrifying it was to see her. Because by the time they got around to those close-ups of me, she was nowhere in the vicinity, and it was after many arm shots and hand shots and finger shots and nose shots and eye shots. So it's tough because you have to keep the momentum going, you have to keep the emotion.
We think of death as that momentary thing. Well, Brian has no such illusions as to death. And yet, in protracting that death and making it abstract, the part of that death on screen that would make you want to close your eyes, he makes you want to open your eyes because he expands it enough so that you can go along with him in thinking that it is both a kind of a super reality and at the same time very unreal, making it more palatable to watch and comprehend.
It was all storyboarded. Again, all the cards around the room, and there were multiple points of view. There's Angie's point of view, and then ultimately there's Nancy's point of view. And there's sort of, two points of view on the same action. And ending in, Nancy seeing Bobby before the door closes.
The getting killed early off didn't bother me. As a matter of fact, when Brian was pleading his case, he said, I have to have you because I need a recognizable person who's willing to die in the movie in the first half hour. And I need somebody that the audience will like immediately because I don't have time to set her up. I didn't analyze it when I read it. It was just a wonderful role. And that first half hour, 25 minutes, it's all me.
At the time of Dressed to Kill, I was married to Brian, to Palma. He was beginning to write it. And he'd read me these scenes that he'd written. I just loved it. And he said, great, because that's, going to be your part. I had no clue before that. I really had no idea that he was writing that role with me in mind.
That girl out there saw the murderer.
That's terrible. Do you know who it is? Some broad.
I was very well entrenched in New York cop talk. And Dennis, who played a cop for me in The Fury, is just a great actor. And when you have actors like this, you try to find a role. And so I just took all this New York cop stuff that I knew and created a character for Dennis to play.
Doctor, we got a brutally murdered woman here.
I began researching police officers in general when I was doing theater work in Chicago. I just observed them all the time. And I picked up certain mannerisms that they had, and wearing leather jackets and gold chains at that time was pretty standard.
Are you kidding?
I chose throughout the years. Brian really likes to build upon scenes as you're doing them. I do remember one time in particular that Brian decided to have some dialogue change where I mimicked Michael Caine's character.
Hey, could she have met one of these nuts at your office? I mean, some kind of weirdo she could have turned on that might have followed her?
The term we use, Detective Marino, is not weirdo. but a person suffering from emotional dysfunction and a problem of maladaptation.
That was thrown to us on the spot as we were filming it. Michael had to say it first, and then I had to repeat it, and he was having trouble memorizing it too. And each time that he would have a problem with it, I thought, oh, good, it gives me a couple extra minutes to try to memorize it. Then the first time he did get through it, then I thought, oh, hell, now I got to say it.
And that way I can be absolutely sure that my,
Weirdo isn't your person suffering from emotional dysfunctions and problems of maladaptation.
There are almost no restrictions in especially our scenes together.
Ah, look, Miss Blake, let's cut this shit, huh?
We could really say and do almost anything with one another.
Let's face it, you're a whore, huh?
For that time, the kind of harsh dialogue that we used was not commonly used so much in film.
Now, who are you fucking?
So it was really a treat for an actor to be able to say fuck and was able to, to lay it on the line and just say those words instead of finding clever words to disguise what you really wanted to say.
The character of Liz Blake is a high-class call girl, and I certainly had no experience at that. Ann Roth, the costume designer, she knew a few call girls. In fact, she offered to take me out with them, and she spent some time talking to me about these girls and what they were like, and she was very, very instrumental in helping me with all of that. I didn't realize it, but I've been having these terrible nightmares.
Oh. What were they about?
One of the things that was suggested to me, I think maybe Brian had suggested it, is to look at Xavier Hollander's The Happy Hooker. And I was reading Nancy Friday's book. It had all these fantasies, women's fantasies, sexual fantasies. They were all, and it was all the same thing in one way or another. It was all a dark stranger, whatever. He closes the door, locks it, and takes out a razor. I was so excited about working with Michael Caine. I just loved him as an actor, and I was so nervous. And he was very generous with me on the set. That scene where I have to tell him my dream. The way that it was filmed, there was no place for him to be. And Brian said, well, you go relax, Michael, and we'll just shoot this scene, and, we'll get... He says, no, I'll be in the room because she'll know that I'm here. So he sat there the whole time that we were shooting my part of the scene, and it did make a difference. I could feel his presence, and his responding, or I see, made all the difference in the world to me. Do you want to, all those things, seducing him very graphically. And I was so nervous. I'm sure he realized that, and he said after we read through the scene, he looked at me and says, isn't it amazing? Actors come in and they don't even know someone, and they say things that they wouldn't say to someone that they know intimately. And he had a way of saying it, had a great sense of humor, and put me at ease right away, and I always felt very comfortable working with him after that. Well, what do you think? That was a very hard scene to shoot. There's something about black lingerie and garters and all of that that seems to generate a different kind of feeling. Would you like to touch me?
Thank God I was young and healthy. I think I ended up getting a cold anyway. It was actually shot in two different halves. Half it was shot on a real New York City street, and then half it was shot in the studio. And they did a beautiful job of creating the outside of the brownstone that we were matching to, so that a lot of it was in the studio. Buckets of water were being poured out of an artificial rain system. But even out on the street, they had to set up these huge rain towers. And rain doesn't read necessarily that easily on film, so the rain had to be even thicker and heavier and more. Basically, film reads about half of what the water is. So if that looks like a downpour, I felt like I was going to drown. And of course, there were difficult things about it too, like doing that little shot where I fall down. It's not a big deal, except by take 15 or so, you're starting to get real sore and going, oh, I don't know how many more times I can do this. Physically, Michael Caine only once put on women's clothing, and that is in that last sequence. All the rest of the time, it's this actress, Susanna Clem, who's either playing Michael Caine, playing a woman, or playing the cop who is following. which is kind of one of those odd, disturbing realities of a Brian De Palma film. Not only is everybody pretending to be something else, and you've got a man dressing up as a woman, but then you've got a different woman actually playing him dressing up as a woman.
I got an actress that was the same size as Michael Caine. We worked out a pair of glasses that had a nose on it that matched Michael's. And she played Bobby all through the movie.
I found out where she lives, so I'm just gonna wait right here until she shows her face.
And on the phone, we had to get a voice that, of course, couldn't be Michael Caine's voice because it would sort of give it away. It had to be sort of a twisted voice that's sort of supposed to be Michael Caine, but is really somebody else.
Played by William Finley, who is an alumni of some of Brian's early movies, and he's actually the voice on the phone.
Look, I want to buy 60 shares of Autotron. What's it sell for?
I'm glad I took care of that cock teaser.
Dr. Elliot? Oh, God, there was such tension on the set. Everybody was nervous, and Brian was saying, like, just, maybe you better go in and just see him before, knock on his door and go in and see him so that you don't burst into hysteria when he walks on the set. So I went and knocked on his dressing room door, and he opened the door, and there he was in the wig and the makeup with a big cigar in his mouth. He came on the set, and he said, looked around to all the crew, all these sort of macho guys, and he says, well, I always knew if I worked long enough and hard enough, I'd get to play me mom.
The nightmare with the nurse in the white shoes. I used to work on an accident ward in Philadelphia, so all my years in the hospital, nurses with white shoes have obviously stuck in my subconscious quite strongly. And it just started with setting up a transsexual. He wears women's clothes. He escapes the nut house. And, you put all the logic together of how your dream would work.
The dream sequence, the water was never hot enough, I can tell you that. It really wasn't. It was lukewarm at best. And it was a trickle, it was really horrible. It was a very intricate scene, that last shower scene. Very complicated and complex, a lot of different setups. And I don't even know for sure, even seeing it laid out, if it was very clear to me how it was all going to be put together.
Always with sequences like that, and you look in any sort of classical horror film when they're trying to do a boo, you've always got to have the horror coming from exactly the place that the audience is not looking, and that's always the key.
Something for me very disturbing because I had the prosthetics on my throat. It almost seemed real to me. It's silly in the moment because someone's pumping the blood, someone's pulling a string. So I had someone laying on the floor over here and someone laying over it's all very mechanical. At the same time, you have to kind of put that out of your mind a little bit so that you can find the emotion of it. And I have to tell you, there was something about, I remember grabbing my throat, as I was supposed to, and feeling that liquid coming through. There was something in the touch of it that triggered the feeling for me. And then catching a glimpse of it in a mirror and seeing that blood, it really upset me. I was having a lot of nightmares at the time, and I would wake up. I would wake up screaming. So it seemed to go, yeah, another night. I'm just waking up from another nightmare. I did have a lot of nightmares at the time, so I had a lot to draw on.
I always say about making films, I always want them better. And I always think of things that we could have done to make them better. But after Dress to Kill, I had nothing to say. I thought it was a perfect film.
Kate Miller is the best work I've ever done. And she was really not like me at all. I love it that it's not Angie having a good old time, it's Angie acting. I had no idea while Brian was directing me that he was doing so wonderfully by me. I don't know if he knew I had it in me. I didn't. I really didn't know I would be that good in something not very much like me. And I thought I was terrific.
And the movie speaks for itself. I mean, here it is, we're talking about it today. You know, the audiences loved it. Really, the important critics loved it. They're still writing about this movie today. It just felt great to be part of really another wonderful movie.